Mi gente, you already know who it is. It's Danny Limelight. And I need all of you to subscribe to According to Wiz podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and all other platforms.
Good morning, party people. We are up at not exactly the butt crack of dawn, but pretty close to it. Because you know why? I have the head coach of the Jujitsu Laboratory. She is the one and only Rebecca Mattison. Rebecca, what's going on?
What's up? What's up? What's up? Yeah, it's not quite the ass crack of dawn, but it's definitely one of my favorite times to be up because I feel like getting things done in the morning and waking up early is like kind of my vibe. So I'm into it. Let's go. I got my coffee.
They say the early bird gets the worm unless you're vegan and whatever the vegan alternative to worms are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So, I mean, obviously, you know, you've literally set your phasers to stun in terms of your goal in your mastery and understanding of jiu-jitsu. But how did it all start for you?
Oh, geez. How did I get into jiu-jitsu? Well, I'm from a really small town in Alberta. So martial arts was not like a thing. The biggest, the most popular thing at that time and place was karate. And, you know, in like the 70s and 80s, karate was bumping. People were really cool with it. They were like, oh, this is hype stuff. And then Pride happened and UFC happened and people started believing less and less in that specific martial art. And by the time I was, 13, I was, that was like the early 2000s. And that kind of culture was washing out. And what I thought about martial arts was like, oh, they don't work. We see those videos all over YouTube of like the guy who pretends to like smack the guy or like, hit his chest and the guy falls back and passes out. So I really didn't believe in martial arts. I was like, that's just kind of like, even Bruce Lee, I was like, he's cool, but like, I don't know what's going on behind that scene. So when I got into college, I was studying psychology and I picked out like the nerdiest girl in class. I was like, you're going to be my study partner. And she turned out to be like even nerdier than I thought and was all, hey, you should try this martial art I just picked up. She'd been training for about 2 months. And I was like, sure, martial arts, like whatever, girl, that's going to be some silly stuff. And she's like, no, come watch a class. And I was like, okay, I'll come watch a class. And it was like this big like bay gym with this overhead place to watch. And it was a white belt class. Like, first of all, she shouldn't have asked me to come watch a white belt class. Like, when I looked down on those people, I was like, this looks like a bunch of adult drunk pandas. Like, they don't know their ass from their elbow. They don't know, they don't know what they're doing. And it just reinforced that, like, oh, martial arts aren't real. They're not cool. And then a few months later, she's like, no, it's still really cool. She was still trying to push it on me. And she showed me this Kimura and armbar from Side Control where you basically lock the arm and, twist the shoulder out of its socket. And I had to obviously tell her to stop because it was going to hurt me. And it was at that moment that I was like, all my suspicions of whether or not this really could work kind of were out the window. And I was like, okay, I'll try. Yeah. Upon trying my first class, I was like immediately hooked. It was something like I grew up doing dance. I know my body really well. And one of the first things I learned was really complicated, but I caught on really quickly. And I was like, okay, so I'm not good at this. I wasn't automatically good, but I could see that it took practice and refinement to get better at. And that kind of hooked me right away.
Yeah, I mean, literally hooked, right? Yeah. And I think it's fun because you're talking about the hooks and stuff like that. And you said a small town in Alberta, Canada. Could that be close to Calgary, Alberta, Canada?
Like very close, but still a 2-hour drive. So like when I say small town, I'm like saying 5,000 people. Yeah.
But Jesus, that's crazy. Well, see, the reason why Calgary, Alberta Canada is so notable to me is my first like inclination of what combat sports were was a gentleman by the name of Bret the Hitman Hart, right?
Oh,
He
yeah.
was from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, right? And
Yeah.
for me as a young kid, right? I mean, of course, I was watching probably like Tom and Jerry and Popeye cartoons and what have you, right? But once I heard about like Bret Hart coming out in pink and black with shades and whatever, and every time he or his brother-in-law Jimmy Apple Hart or any of those the Hart folk, right? They would talk about the Father Stu, who is a legendary catch wrestler, and he would basically put a sugar hold on football players. And think about what we knew about the time. Like you saw a guy or a gal with muscles, you just assumed that they could kick ass, right? Like
yeah.
the end of the bar, right? So when like a football player is getting stretched, a soccer player is getting stretched, a gymnast is getting stretched, and hell, even one time out of the year at the Calgary Stampede, Steve would put a sugar hold and put to sleep the wrestling bear. I said, "Fuck Popeye, man. That's like that's what we're doing." And I kind of stayed with it. And even my introduction to what would become mixed martial arts, it was from Dan Severn coming to the WWF in like 96, 97 with 3 non-WWF belts, and I was like, whoa, what? And then him basically ragdolling Owen Hart. Bret Hart was the champion, but even he would tell you that Owen, his little brother, rest in peace, was the stud, right? Because he could do all the Mexican lucha libre shit, the Japanese pursuit, and what have you, right? And when Severn just comes out in a gray shirt, black tights, and just starts ragdolling Owen, I was just like, oh, everything I know is a lie.
Yeah. I think like bless the fact that all of those things kind of came about at the same time, because basically what you're saying is you started seeing video footage, and that was one of the things that can't lie. Like, of course, WWE is choreographed and all of that, but their skill level is very high, and their knowledge of martial arts and throws is there. And really what kind of turned my head, because like I knew about WWE, but I wrote that off as like, okay, that's some made up shit. Like that was still part of my whole I don't believe in martial arts thing. And then when I saw these videos again of Carlson Gracie and Hoyler and on all these guys doing pure jiu-jitsu on in the Pride realm and in UFC, I was like, okay, like there is a level of realness to this that that I didn't understand or expect. And then now when I watch WWE, I'm like, oh man, like that shit is real and is pretty like, and is really, I was like on a highlight reel of WWE mess ups, like when they like forget to catch their guy or whatever, like that is some serious business. And then I also saw major saves. Like it was like the first video was like, oh, major mess ups. And the next video was like when their partner was, out of sync or just off time and they caught him and saved him at just the right time. Like that takes a level of knowledge and understanding of what's going on. So just my whole world into what martial arts is and all of the different facets just kind of exploded and expanded, in that first year of training. And that's really what got me so, involved with it and fall so deeply in love with it, was just that there was all of this culture and all of this history in every single facet of what was going on. And now I'm starting to look like 6 years into jiu-jitsu, I'm starting to look at, Bruce Lee and his teachings. And I'm like, oh my God, that man knew what he was talking about. Like I wrote him off for way too long. And it's honestly embarrassing as a martial artist to be like, oh yeah, now I believe Bruce Lee. Like now I think that stuff's cool. But that's the way it goes. I think you have to do it to believe it. And that's really what I encourage people to do who are kind of on the fence about trying, is like, look, just go to a class, get your ass handed to you, and let me know whether or not it works. Like that's the only way you're going to find out.
Now, what I want to know is, one of your limbs was being contorted in a way that you probably weren't comfortable with before the class. Did you kind of respond in turn to try one of those like one touch deals to make them fly 300 feet?
No, I think like like when you go into jiu-jitsu class, it is like full contact. There is, the first thing that happened was this purple belt, guy sat on top of my chest and was like, hey, get yourself out of this situation. And I was kind of just like lost. I was like, I don't know. And then you start pushing it and trying to get out of it and using all your real reactions, and all of them are wrong. You're getting submitted from everything that you try. So it was really like there was no smoke and mirrors with jiu-jitsu. It's just full on like you either gonna live or die situation. So that really fascinated me.
No, 100%. So how does it go? Did you know pretty on? Because often jiu-jitsu players, grapplers, we talk about the bug that hits us all, right? That bites us all in the fucking posterior, right? And was it that initial class that did it, or where did it kind of like, okay, this is what I'm doing now?
I think because I just had been somebody who was athletic and already like good enough at a lot of sports and whatever, that jiu-jitsu kind of was a challenge that I knew out of just researching it, because of course, before I went in there, I did all sorts of YouTubing and all sorts of research. Like I knew probably more than the average person who had been training about the history and the technical, side of things. But as far as the bug goes, I just decided that if I was going to do something, I wanted to be consistent. And so I decided that from my first class on, I would go 3 days a week. And that was the bare minimum of what I was going to commit to. And then by, 2 or 3 weeks, you start to see a little bit of progress through the warm-ups, and you start to connect a few things. And that's really what, pulled me in. And that's when the bug set in, was because like, of course I was interested and the inclination was there, but a lot of people quit because of that. Those first 4 weeks are really hard. You don't know what the hell you're doing, and people are beating you up. So, and I mean, when I say beating you up, like it's not like you're going home with broken arms or anything, but your ego is more than bruised. And that is a really hard thing to overcome. They say that 1 in 10,000 people who try jiu-jitsu earn their black belt. So I saw those odds and I was like, I'm going to be one of those people. Like I'm going to be 1 in 10,000. And I knew that with consistency, I would eventually get there. So, 3 days a week turned into like 6 days a week, 2 times a day. And that's when, if you want to say the bug, I was probably in my first competition. Once I finished that, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. This is it. Like, I don't want to do anything else. I literally dropped out of university 5 months after starting jiu-jitsu. Yeah.
I mean, but again, you bet on yourself, and you could have essentially treaded water, right? Or you're like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing and whatever, where you knew pretty early on, like, I don't know, like, the full extent of it, or maybe I know a little bit more than most at my level, but, this is what I'm going to do. And rather than tread water, I'm going to go full bore into what I feel is what's going to raise my life condition.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing with, like, if you look at what I was in school for prior, I was first in school for 2 years for visual arts, and then I went to school for psychology. And when I found jiu-jitsu, like what my intention was with schooling was I wanted to help people through art, through art therapy. That was like my thing. I was like, okay, I'm going to go help people who are, having hard time with their mental health, or we're going to do some kind of painting class, and that's what's going to help people. And then I found jiu-jitsu and I was like, oh my God, this is a martial art, and it completely involves dealing with your ego. It completely involves dealing with your mental health. And I just saw that as like my way out of a system that was so like stiff. And so like you have to have your degree, and then you have to have your master's, and then you have to have, practice, and then you have to, and it was very much like sitting in a desk for 8 years or more. And with jiu-jitsu, it was so much more exposure and so much more physically involved, which is something that, like, for me, I get bored really quickly. Like, I cannot, university was really hard because as much as I wanted to learn and as much as I really loved psychology, there was no like lesson being taught to me that, you know, I had to go through on a personal level. It was all just kind of knowledge being poured into you that didn't necessarily have a personal application. So finding jiu-jitsu was basically like, okay, this is how I'm going to help people. This is how you do it. You spend 8 to 10 years getting your black belt, and then you open a gym and you start helping people. And that to me was like, okay, that is my degree. That is the kind of education I want.
I think it's amazing. It's amazing. Now, when you were doing those, you know, countless competition as a white belt and what have you, you know, were you doing that in that kind of, you know, in that kind of university setting, or did you kind of go and seek out a formal jiu-jitsu gym? Like, how did that work?
So the way things work with jiu-jitsu is you go to an academy, you know, you never really know what, like, especially as a white belt, you don't really know even what you're looking for or what is good or bad. You just go to class and hope that something sticks. So luckily and fortunately, the gym that I went to was affiliated with one of the best gyms in the world for competition. So that was kind of just a strike of luck. I literally Google searched like jiu-jitsu gyms close to my house. And that at that point I had been going to university in Calgary. So that was where I got to start. And the gym that was closest was a 10-minute drive from my house, was an Atos affiliate. And they were competition oriented. So they had their beginner classes. And then what they would do is they would run competition classes after the beginner and the introduction classes. And once you had a certain level of stripes on your belt, you could go to the competition classes. So that was like my first, like, okay, basically like get a good grade in the beginner classes so that you could go to the competition classes. And the competition classes are just faster paced. They're more about like conditioning you for having, you know, maybe 7 opponents, not at the same time, but you know, that round after round after round that you would see in competition. And, you know, I think 6 weeks into jiu-jitsu, I had my first competition. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I came at those girls like a flying spider monkey, and it worked. Like, and for, you know, all of white belt, and I probably competed 13 times that year, that whole mentality of I'm just going to come at you and see what happens worked. And then of course, as you meet more technical opponents, that strategy just doesn't, it kind of falls apart. So luckily at the time I was also building technical skill, and I was able to kind of carry myself through that. But competition with jiu-jitsu is a completely independent structure from any other sport or organization. It is like the gyms organize the competition. There is one international federacy. There is one national federacy. So when you go to compete, you're paying for your own entry fees, you know, you don't get paid to compete. So it was very much something that you had to pour a lot of money into before ever getting rewarded. And when I say rewarded, to me, that meant like having my own gym and getting a black belt. Like it's 8 to 10 years for the average person to get their black belt. So I was like, the best way to do this is to just put, you know, all of my effort in, go 2 times a day, go to every competition that I can think of. The first time I went to Worlds, like a world championship, I was 5 months into jiu-jitsu, and I've been every year since. So I was like, I think that's the fastest way to level up. And, you know, I got my brown belt in 5 years. So that is quite a bit faster than the average, you know, that's putting me on track to be about to black at like 6 or 7 years, maybe. But we'll see, you know, it's the belting system is completely up to each person's individual professor. So I don't know, there's all of this like unorganized, organized way of doing things with jiu-jitsu that I think if you're on the outside of, it's really hard to see how that structure works. Like, how do we decide as an entire community, jiu-jitsu community, how do we know when someone's a blue belt? How do we know when someone's a purple belt? How do we know when someone's a black belt? And it's kind of just this like it's talked about, but it's like this, like your professor just knows. There's no questioning, you know, like when you can start giving brown belts and black belts trouble, that's when they start, you know, seeing that your level is coming up. So it's very much about showing up, putting your skill to the test, and, you know, not letting that whole losing and not feeling good in the gym stop you from coming back in the next day.
No, 1000%, which usually on average, it takes about, they say, a white, some black, a full kind of evolution, usually happens on average about 10 years, right? I mean, and that's if you're going consistently. And my goodness, I mean, usually at blue, people drop out, right? Like you're kind of like rip roaring to get your blue belt and whatever, right? You're stepping out with your white belt to get your blue. And then for whatever reason, like life might get in the way or like a sordid relationship or whatever, right? Like just shit happens, right? And then you see people drop off and then like there's maybe a year, a 6 month, 3 month, year hiatus, and then they come back. So sometimes it gets a little bit longer, but on average, it's like 10. So you kind of expedited even what the average is, but like at the course that you're doing, about 3 years.
Yeah, definitely. And even just to put a note on why blue belts drop off, I think that's because, remember when I said like at white belt, that whole just coming at you at like a spider monkey was working? At blue belt, that's not going to work anymore. And I feel like a lot of people get really discouraged when that, expectation is leveled up. So let's say you had a really great white belt time, your professor gives you this blue belt, and now you have to represent this like belt system, this blue belt. And a lot of people can feel scared. They can feel intimidated. They can feel like they're not at blue belt level. Their professor promoted them too soon. And that's when like all of this mentality comes in and all of this like mental work comes in. So what wasn't a problem at white belt, say, their girlfriend or their boyfriend was complaining about them going to training, is now going to affect them at blue belt because they have more doubts about themselves, more personal doubts. So I feel like that is a really big reason why people have the blue belt blues, is because they feel that they should be better or are worse than, what their imaginary level should be. And that's what keeps people off of the mat. Now, like I've seen people who started with me at white belt are still at white belt, 5 years, 6 years later. And there are people who I know started the same year as me that are black belt now. So it's all like, it's very much what you are personally going to put in, on the mat. And that's something that nobody can take away from you. So that's kind of, I feel like the coolest part about really, training hard and leveling up quick is that like your belt will represent that. That being said, I'm a brown belt, but I know that there's people who are training for 13, 14 years that are still a brown belt. So they obviously have way more experience and way more knowledge than I do. But for some reason or another, maybe they did have that long break at blue belt, or they took a long break at purple belt, or they were inconsistent. They just haven't reached that level yet. So for me, I really try not to compare myself to others or my journey to others, but like, what am I capable of? If they said that the average, time was 10 years, can I get it in 5? Can I get it in 6? Like that to me is just a personal challenge. And it doesn't matter to me what other people are doing. And that's what I think is like really cool about jiu-jitsu is it is a team sport, because you do need your training partners to show up and you need your coach, but it is completely up to the individual how much your skill level is going to improve,
Which, I love that you said that your jiu-jitsu journey, because with your particular instance, it was a literal journey, right? You kind of left this small town, 2 hours outside of Calgary. You follow me in this like kind of mental wormhole that I kind of went down. So you began grappling in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, as did Brett the Hitman Hart, right?
Yeah.
He has a daughter named Sabina, who they call Beans, right?
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know they call her Beans.
Yeah, because, right? And you're Beans of Nebula. So with that all being said, at least according to Woods, you are the female Bret Hart.
Yeah. Thank you.
Excellence of execution, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that when people, really fall in love with something, they will find a way. And luckily for me, I have been luckily and fortunately, I have always been someone that like, if I wanted something, I will go and get. And jujitsu was just something that like I saw that was long-term. And, you know, I saw master's degrees and PhDs as something that like, that would be cool. It would be cool to have that piece of paper on my wall. Like, and it would take a lot of work, but I never really felt like passionate about it. And with jujitsu, I was willing to like, I don't even want to tell you what I was willing to do. Like I moved like, okay. So the first time I competed at Worlds, I was 5 months old in jujitsu. The next year, and I went to that head gym, that Atos gym, that competition team down in San Diego. I planned a 2-week trip. I was like, okay, I'm going to go train with these guys for 2 weeks. I'm going to be ready for the world champion. And like what I had done, you know, I had won 3 competitions prior to that. And so I was feeling like hot. I was feeling ready. I was feeling good. And like locally, I was doing really well. And people were like, where did this girl come from? Bullshit, you haven't been training. Like I've been beating girls that, you know, had been practicing for 3 years and with 6 weeks of, you know, training. So I was feeling good. And I went to this gym in San Diego and I had my ass handed to me for 2 freaking weeks straight. And then I went and I lost my first match at Worlds, you know, within a minute or something. It was bad. And I went home and I was like, how am I going to do this? So I just kept doing the local competitions. And I decided that year that if I wanted to be better, I had to put myself in a better environment. I had to put myself in San Diego with that competition team for longer. 2 weeks wasn't long enough. So I built a teardrop trailer because I wasn't going to be able to afford staying in a hotel in San Diego for a month. So I was like, okay, I got my car. I got my teardrop trailer, which, you know, cost me like something like $1,500 to build. I'm going to go down there for a month. I went down there for a month and, you know, this is a year later. So I had a 1.5 year experience and I got 3rd place that year. I won 4 matches and, you know, lost my 5th match and got 3rd place on the podium. And kind of in my, because I felt so mentally kind of defeated from the year before, like, oh, I don't think like a local girl, you know, from Canada, a small town girl is going to be able to make it on the world stage. And when I did, I got to 3rd place and every other girl on that podium was from Canada. And I was like, maybe, just maybe I can do this. Like maybe I can get that number 1 spot. And that was like a turning point because I was doing it because I loved it and I was passionate about it, but I really didn't believe that I could make a career out of it until that moment. And I was like, it doesn't matter where you're from. It matters how much work you're willing to put in and how much you're willing to sacrifice. So the next year, I took that same teardrop trailer and I went down for 6 months. And that was probably the hardest thing I have, you know, I had done at that point was just completely leave my family for 6 months. I left with, you know, no promise of having a job or having a way to take care of myself down there. I just had a handshake from a guy who said I could teach kids classes, you know, under the table. So I was like, I was like, okay, I'm going to try it. And that year was my blue belt year. And I did really well in competition. I placed, you know, multiple times. I placed internationally that year. And, so the next year I was like, okay, I can't live in a teardrop trailer anymore. I can't stand up. There was obviously many complications with living in a parking lot. So I thought the next best thing was to buy a van that I could stand up in and take that down. And that same year I got my purple belt. So it was a new level, new devil. And the same thing happened 6 months down there. And I've just repeated that recipe ever since. And I think that's really what got me on that, you know, steep incline of skill building was because I just was willing to put myself into situations that other people like, you know, big fish in a little pond they don't want to do. They want to be that big fish. I was a big fish in a little pond. I could have, you know, stayed in Canada and made a great name for myself just locally. And like many, many men do. There are many guys that, you know, have great gyms out there and are great professors and are great black belts, but they never knew what it was like to put themselves in that, you know, environment where they're going to not be that big fish anymore. So that was just something that made me grow exponentially, and that my willingness to do that, and I have to thank myself for that, is like, you know, the biggest difference in what I could have been and what I am now, for sure.
Well, here's a different methodology, right? Because AG East Los Perros says, I stay at 4-stripe blue belt and kill, just to discourage guys. So
I don't like. If I was his professor, he'd be getting his purple belt today. Like, I don't like, that is some bullshit. Like, but you know, there is like how much time have you been at blue belt? Because like I was a 4-stripe blue belt, but I had only been training for 2.5 years at that point. So there was people who, when I went to competitions, they were like, you're a sandbagger. And sandbagger means someone who is above their skill level, who is representing a lower skill on their belt. And that was something that I was always just kind of like, what the fuck? Like, I've only been doing this for 3 years. How dare you call me a sandbagger? Like, I'm just doing the most that I can. And, you know, I feel like when people have that kind of attitude of like, I'm going to destroy every new guy in the gym, I'm kind of like, dude, some higher belt need to put a smackdown on you, because you have too much pride in being a blue belt. Like, how about you just pick on, you know, those higher belts, pick on someone your own size and, you know, see how that goes. Because I think the worst part about having that attitude is that you're just going to have less people to train with, period. If those guys don't show up and don't feel comfortable training and you don't help them a little bit, then you're doing yourself a misfavor, because that just means that there's going to be less people for you to challenge yourself against, you know? And I think that's perhaps a toxic type of mentality to have. That being said, I fucking love crushing white belts. So there's this balance of like, you have to help them. Like, you can crush them in the moment, but you have to be like, good job. Like, keep coming to class. Like, it's going to be okay. You're going to build a skill level, you know? So, and I don't know what it's like to be a guy on the mat. I think it's a completely different experience than what it is to be, you know, a 120-pound female. So if, you know, let's say that there's this 200-pound 4-stripe blue belt and there's this 200-pound no experience bodybuilder, egotistical asshole coming in on the mat, go ahead, smash that guy. Like, I don't care. That's going to be good for him. If he doesn't come back, it's because his ego's not ready to be challenged. But if you're that 4-stripe white belt, 200 pounds, and you're coming in and beating up, you know, that 130-pound white belt guy that really just needs this to build his confidence, then shame on you, dude. That's not what martial arts is about.
There you go. Damn, went all in. Shit.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My bad. And he said, my coach said he'll give me my brown once I heal the old dude in a gi.
Old dude in a gi. I don't know, dude. I feel like professors, one of their favorite things to do is to troll their students. Like, I have seen so many professors be like, okay, if you can submit me this round, I'll give you your purple belt. And then the guy goes like all out and he doesn't submit him. And he was never going to give you your purple belt. He's just trolling you because he has that control and he knows that you want it. So he's like dangling that carrot in front of your face, you know? I think that if you show up on a regular basis and you build your skill and you keep, you know, showing that you are growing, your professor's not going to say like, it's until you heel hook that particular guy. Like that's kind of, he's trolling you. Like that is a big troll move that professors do. And I will do that. Like I will do that when the time comes, because I think it's funny, but like at the same time, you know, it's not about that particular thing that's going to happen. He probably has several other things that are the real indicators that you're going to get your brown belt, and he's not telling you what those are. So that's what you should be wary of. That's what you should consider. So
here's the thing, right? I mean, this is a for me, what I think is like the human condition, right? Where we were never supposed to be like, the alpha species, right? Like if cheetahs can outrun us, gorillas who kind of biologically are closest to us in the animal kingdom, like how the hell did us, like, how did we get to be like the alpha where we can set up roads and run roughshod through like rainforests and all that jazz, right? So I will tell you, when I came into jiu-jitsu, I was very fortunate where I was working a regular job, well, not just a regular job, but my highest kind of esteemed position. I was like a marketing assistant for a tech company, corner office, making the highest like grossing amount that I'd ever made in my life. And as like a high school graduate of Inglewood High, I'm like, okay, like not Inglewood always up to no good. I did good, right? And one of my coworkers was a blue belt that went to the Bakersfield Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Matt Baker, who's a John Jock black belt in Bakersfield, California. Right? And I was actually there when his wife, Jill, got her black belt from Jean Jacques. So that was a cool moment, right? So I did 6 months of that, and I kind of go in weird phases like that. Like still no stripe belt, white belt, whatever. Trained like 4 to 6 times a week there, right? And then I don't train for 2 years, end up at Fight Academy in Pasadena, California. And I remember, I mean, those are some dogs. There's Savant Young, like Herb Dean would come in and roll for a while. And my biggest compliment was like right after the Ronda Rousey Holly Holm fight in Australia, Herb Dean comes to roll, and I'm all like super nervous, and he's like, he kind of picks me up and like, come on, let's roll. I'm like, right? 6 minutes, and I have my tongue hanging like a long red necktie, right? And he looks over at me and he's like, "You've rolled before." For me, again, I'm a pro wrestling fan, right? I wanted my purple belt for no other reason to compete at NAGA because they give out belts, not medals, right? so I remember being there doing like belt ceremony class and whatever, and so there was a blue belt. I'll never forget it. There was a blue belt that they were like, you got to roll through to get your blue belt, right? And then Coach Savant goes, "Woods, you tap this dude, you get your blue belt too." And I was like, and I saw like that dude's like wife, and I was like, but the animalistic mentality, I was like, I'm gonna murder this dude, right? And then I kind of felt, again, my into like MMA and everything is down to B7. And down to B7, talking about that historic fight with Royce Gracie, right? When he kind of looks over at Elio, right? This is his deal. Don't know if it happened, but this is his account. And saying like, oh, I saw Elio seeing like his prized child get mauled, and I let him have it. In my mind, I was like the beast Dan Severn, UFC Hall of Famer. I let it go because I looked over at his wife. There was a young baby, and I was like, I can't do this to that guy. But that animalistic,
Yeah, that feeling. I think like there's a time and a place for every attitude and for every opportunity on the mat. And I think like it takes somebody who is really self-aware of like why they're doing something. And I'm not going to say that every black belt, gets to black belt and doesn't have an ego anymore, because that shit's not true. Like if anything, it might be bigger than it ever was. But that is something that I think jiu-jitsu can really teach us how to understand, is like, why am I doing something? What is the reward, so that I can pat myself on the back, or is the reward because I'm doing something that is actually good for my fellow man and for my, my community. And to me, that's the real mark of a martial artist. Like, it's not, if I had a student who was a 4-stripe white belt and chased or a 4-stripe blue belt and chased every white belt off the mat, I would be pissed at that guy. Like, look, you're not helping me. You're not helping me build a community that is getting stronger together and is getting better together. So, I think just in that little instance that you had an opportunity to be a martial artist or to be an asshole. and you chose martial artist, you know, and that's something that like I would hope all of my students do, or you know, everybody in the sport would do. That being said, if it's a competition, tap the guy, you know, like do it, put yourself out there.
Yeah. Which, I mean, you spoke of, you know, the development of your grappling as well as the people around you, right?
Yeah.
So you, in your own right, are a head coach of the Jujitsu Laboratory. So
yeah.
Talk to me about the formation and how you assume that role and how you continue.
Yeah. So last year at Purple Belt, so because I had been going in and out of the country for 6 months at a time, every time I came back to Canada, I had to find a new job. And every time I went down there, I either had to save enough or do whatever I had to do down there to make ends meet. And what happens with that kind of inconsistency with jobs is that you have to become very comfortable with not having enough. And you have to come up on an idea, like, and that's where Jiu-Jitsu Mat Lab came from, was that I was so tired of like starting new every time I came back. And luckily for me, like I had good connections, and every time I got a job, it was something that I could do for 50 years. It was always in the oil industry. I was, you know, assistant to a CEO of an oil company. I was working at an engineering company. So these are all jobs that like the average Jill would be like, oh my God, I would kill for that. And I said no to all of them within 6 months, you know? And I just got tired of having to like rely on someone else to pay my bills. And I was like, look, I've poured everything into this sport. Like I said, I spent thousands of dollars going to competition. I put it all on the line. Like, when is this shit going to pay me back? Because I can't wait till black belt. Like, I can't wait till I get an academy. I cannot wait because I need to pay my bills now. I need to go to competitions now. I need to keep this lifestyle going. And thank God for this white belt angel in disguise that I met in San Diego. She was this 20-something-year-old white belt chick, that blonde hair, always on her phone. And I was like, she kind of was hanging out with our group. And I was like, what the hell is going on with this girl? Like, she's driving a nice car. She's got her shit together, and she's younger than me, and she's a white belt. So what the fuck? Like, what? Like, how come what's going on here? I started investigating a little bit more and asking her more. And she did online coaching for fitness. Her, and I'll just give her a shout out. Thank you, Fears to Fit. Kendall, you're a freaking angel. And she showed me, she was like, look, I think that like you're skilled enough and you have enough experience. Like, why can't you coach jiu-jitsu online? And I was like, oh, people don't do that. You have to coach jiu-jitsu in person. And she was like, okay, whatever. I guess like you don't believe it. So I'm not going to bother you anymore with it. And she kind of just handed me the keys to her house, basically, like her company. She has programs that teaches people how to be online fitness coaches. And of course, it was not specific to jiu-jitsu. I had to do all of that adaptation, but she gave me that information in August before I left California. So she gave me that information. I didn't believe in it. I told a couple friends about it, and they were like, oh, that shit's not going to happen. I went back to Canada, September, got the job at the engineering company, and started working. So September, October, November, December goes by. January, I was like, oh my God, in March, I'm going to have to leave again. I didn't save enough money, and I don't know what the hell I'm going to do down there to continue, you know, having money in the bank. And then that little like voice in the back of my head was like, you can do online coaching. And I was like, that's some bullshit. And then I like went over her course, and I was like, hey, maybe I can do this, because what I had been doing with my Instagram was telling my story as I went. And I had, at that point, you know, I think like 6,000 followers or something that had literally been with me since the teardrop days. And I had always got questions about, how do you do this? Like, how do you do that? What inspires you to stay together? People asking me like, hey, I'm going through a rough time with training right now. Thanks for, you know, helping me out. And so I was like, I think I have enough of a community to do this. I started putting out on my story, I was like, hey, you can hire me to be personally obsessed with your jiu-jitsu. You know, if you're scared to get back in the gym, give me a call. I'll help you out. Like, I have, you know, a 12-week training program. And that same night that I did that, I had 36 people apply to be my students. And I was like, what the hell? Like, this is going to work. And this is pre-pandemic, right? This is February. Actually, it was my 1 year anniversary yesterday. So yeah. So I had those 36 people apply. I had 6 people sign up, which was, as far as I understood, a pretty good conversion rate from, leads to sales. And I just kind of took off. And when the pandemic happened, which was 1 month later, and I was leaving for Pan Am's and everything had to work out, I had already quit my job and told my boss, look, I'm free falling into April with my business. Shit hit the fan. And everybody was banned from training for months. So I had to continue with these clients who were already on board, and I was basically forced to adapt because they had already paid me. We were in the middle of a 12-week program. What the hell was I going to do if they weren't able to train? So I started doing match studies, and that really helped them understand what even the point system was. Like, people don't get what a sweep is. People don't get what counts as a takedown in competition, what doesn't count. So I did that all through the summer. I kept taking new clients and new students. Everybody kept learning and getting good feedback. And now it's just, I'm on my 3rd program. This next program that I built is me teaching it. It's, mindset. It involves mindset. It involves mobility. So I feel like it's my best work yet. And that ball is still rolling. So, with all of the experience that I put in, and with, what's the word I'm looking for? With no guarantee that, jujitsu was going to pay me back, I poured into it. And that's what you have to do. You have to, like, whatever your skill or your dream is, you cannot ask it to give back to you until you've given it enough. And it was that day that, like, I made that first call. I literally had negative $300 in my checking account. Like, I went to go buy groceries before my first sales call, and I couldn't buy groceries. And then this guy bought the package, and I literally fell over. I was like, what the fuck? This is the first time jiu-jitsu's ever paid me. And it was 4 years later, 4 years from the time that I started, and thousands of dollars and time put into it. So that was just a turning point. I was like, I have to make this work, because this is something that I can do no matter what. And now, I lived in Charlotte for 4 months. I lived in Crow's Nest for the next 3 months. I was in Boston this last 6 months, and now I'm going to be in Mexico for 2 months, and Europe for, the summer. And it's all thanks to that lowest of low moments where I really, I was crying in the bathtub thinking, like, jiu-jitsu is never going to work for me. I'm always just going to have to put more and more effort in, and it's never going to pay me back until I can get a gym and have a black belt. And that was that purple belt. So, that's really how Jiu-Jitsu Mat Lab unfolded, was out of, I had no other, in my mind, I had no other option. I had to make it work. And then in the middle of that, the blessing that the pandemic was for me was that people started to believe that you could learn online. Everybody had to. And I was the only one who had this head start on what that would look like. And again, thank God for Kendall. Fierce to Fit is her handle on Instagram. If you want to learn how to run your online business, she's a freaking pro. She's 22 years old and has, scaled her business to be in the 6 figures. So that is jiu-jitsu is just this niche that hasn't developed like that. People don't believe it, but I'm going to have that fleet of students that goes to competitions and matching tracksuits in a couple years. And you best believe it. That's my whole goal, is to be you don't need a gym to inspire people and to teach people jiu-jitsu. You just need to have a work ethic.
That's amazing. And it's if you hadn't left your homestead, and kind of ventured out, you wouldn't have met this person and what have you. You hadn't done the 2-drop trailer. If you weren't negative like this, there's a game of outliers, right? That happened, right? But it put you in the course that you felt you wanted to be in, right back when you were in white belt, and it kind of put you there and even in that understanding of jiu-jitsu, which was, again, far further than some of your contemporaries at the time, right? Yeah. You still had in your mind black belt is what's going to happen, and here you are, just a belt rank, stripes away from a black belt, but you got it together. And this podcast didn't exist July of last year, because I mean, I'd kind of spent my, the last 4.5 years building my name here in Southern California, going to MMA, pro wrestling shows, jiu-jitsu competitions, all that stuff, right? To do interviews, first fight interviews, sometimes little money, sometimes a lot of money, sometimes when BuzzFeed did the MMA, like, I want to be an MMA fighter and whatever, I made my commentary debut for that, and my commentary is a part of the video that has like 7 million views and what have you. But it's these things that happen, right? And most people think that it's like overnight, right? And it's just like it's not that. It takes a lifetime to become an overnight success.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And I think that whole, attitude of just understanding that from the player standpoint of being like, okay, I had my mindset on black belt, and out of necessity, I had to make it happen sooner. And that's when magic happens, when it's like you have no other choice but to make it work. And, I fully believe that I'm not the only person who is capable of this. I'm not a black belt world champion. And all of those reasons, like, why should people listen to me, come into hand? But it's the fact that I was honest about my journey. I showed people what it was like to be on the path that I was on. And that's why I had people coming to me, that was the whole thing about it. Was I just showed who I was through that entire time, from white belt till now. And I've had people who've been following me and who have been part of my journey for literal years. And it's just like, for them, it's just this like, what the hell kind of reality TV show is this? Like, I didn't know I would be in Mexico this year, So I think it's really exciting to build that kind of community and have that kind of ownership over yourself, where you're going to make it work. And there's going to be times where, like you said, you have a lot of money or you don't have any money, and you just got to keep taking action towards that goal that you have. It doesn't matter if it's jiu-jitsu or that master's degree in psychology. You have to have that mentality of like, it doesn't matter if other people recognize how much effort I put in. I need to continue putting effort in, and I need to continue looking for results, because that's the only thing that's going to turn that overnight success into success, right?
Oh, 1000%. Which AG says Kendall's a badass, which I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
Now speaking of something that is badass, right? And you might have covered it in one of your lives or Instagram posts, and forgive me for my ignorance, but I think your handle, Beans of Nebula, is awesome, right? So how did that happen? Because I'm according to everybody just knows me. They don't know me as Adam. Fuck all that. Like I was in like high school ROTC, right? And they just call you by your last name, and it stuck for like literally 20 some odd years. And I'm just according to wits, right? But yeah, Beans of Nebula. How did that happen?
Yeah, so that is something, like you said, like, people give you names and they just kind of stick. And my dad called me Beans of Neb since I was as long as I can remember, and that his whole thing was like, oh, you're a bean that fell out of a nebula on Earth, and that's how I found you. He didn't want to talk about, the birds and the bees. So he just told me that I was a bean that fell out of the sky, and I became his daughter that way. And that was just like the birth of that thing. And then at that time, the internet wasn't too popular and handles weren't even a thing. But as soon as handles were a thing, I was like, my email was Beans of Nebula. My MSN handle was Beans of Nebula. My Nexopia handle was Beans of Nebula. When I made Instagram in 2012 or whatever it was, 13, it was Beans of Nebula. And I wasn't even in jiu-jitsu yet. And then when I didn't change it. I started competing and all that kind of stuff. And people just I would show up to competitions and people would be like, hey, you're Beans. And I'm like, actually, I'm an adult, and that's what my dad calls me, but like, whatever. And I think like last year when I started my coaching business, I tried to change it to like Coach Rebecca, and people were pissed. They were like, what the hell? You're Beans of Nebula. You can't change that. Like, that's your identity. And now I kind of just like, I'm like, whatever. I guess that's how I'm known, I'm not going to fight it anymore. It is a pretty unique handle, and people kind of are like, what the hell is that? And when I say it's my childhood nickname, that's kind of like, that's as much information as that's as deep as it goes. This is like, that's my name from as long as I can remember.
Well, I mean, you kind of were forthright in your kind of like evolution of self than I, because I think my first email address is like weaksauce69 because yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I had other handles, like probably had like baby girl 93 handle, but like, Beans of Nebula was always like, always something that I used. And it's unfortunate that it stuck and that I can't be taken seriously, or I'm known as Beans as an adult. Like I'm turning 28 this month. People will in the future come up to me at a tournament and be like, "Hey, you're Beans." And I'll be like, yeah. Unfortunately, that is me.
Yeah, damn right.
Yeah.
I mean, so there have been a lot of people, not just professionally, but personally, that have helped you out along your way, not just in jiu-jitsu, but in life. So let's get some shout outs out of the way.
Oh my God. All the way from the beginning. First, CJ, my black belt professor from home, he has been someone who, like, there's not many people that can travel on a regular basis and still get belted by their home professor, but he watches me like a hawk. He knows what I'm doing. He knows how much effort I'm putting in. And he's someone who every time I come home, he recognizes me for that and awards me for that. So I'm blessed in that way. I have always been supported by the women around me, by my family, my mom and my sisters. They've thought that I'm completely crazy. I'm sure they were not comfortable with me living in teardrop trailers and in vehicles across the country, but they had, major support. And like I said, I would not be here right now if Kendall hadn't believed in me. And she was one of the key factors in my success as a professional in this sport. That being said, my people in San Diego, Johnny Faria, he has been someone who, he's a black belt who trains or who owns Alliance San Diego and Alliance Carlsbad. Mark Vorges from Alliance Carlsbad, Carol Isigera from Alliance Carlsbad. Oh my God, I could, like, the list goes on and on. Elias Gallegos from Alliance Eastlake, and then of course there's always like the people who I've shared the mat with on a regular basis. Like every time I come home, I'm supported, and every time I go somewhere, I'm supported. And that's just something that the jiu-jitsu community is built on, is, allowing people to come and train and being welcoming. So that is big for me. And this last year, I have to say thank you to Giancarlo Bodoni, because he has helped me so much and believed in me so much. And that is really, I mean, if I missed you, I'm sorry, but there's literally so many people that have had key support system or key support roles in this whole act. And I am quite private about all of that stuff on my Instagram, because, that is, that's to me, like, there has to be a difference between personal and business. But as far as jiu-jitsu goes, like, you guys know who you are. Every person that submitted me and every person I've submitted, thank you.
Os. Well, a hearty os goes to you, Beats, for joining us here at According to Woods. Can't thank you enough. And for folks who are so inclined to figure out what you're doing and what Jujitsu Laboratory is doing, where can they find you on social media?
So my handle right there, Beans of Nebula, that is my personal page. I talk about usually my business and all about my adventures on there. And then Jujitsu Mat Lab, JJ Mat Lab, is my technique page. So anytime you want to, brush up on understanding Jiu-Jitsu technique, that's where that stuff is going to be. That is an example of basically what it would be like to work with me in a coaching sense. So if you do want to work with me, you want to be my student, you want me to help you with that mentality, you can apply through the link in my bio to be my student. And we would go from there, meet, and I'll give you a tour of the classroom. As far as, getting a hold of me, I think that Instagram is the best way. I'm looking at expanding across the platforms, which is something I probably have to get at you about. I'm going to be on YouTube, and unfortunately, my peers are telling me that I have to be on TikTok, so I'm gonna go there. But yeah, Instagram is the best place to look at what the heck I'm I've been doing.
Hell yes, hell yes. Before we go, Classic BJJ says, "LOL, girl, where was that distance yesterday when you were on the toilet?" Oof.
Look, it's a fine line, lady. I know how to involve you and how to, do the smoke and mirror thing. But I think that's like really something that people love about my channel is that like I'm not trying to hide what it's like to be just a normal ass person. So like, am I going to tell you about my relationships? Probably not, until they're either really solid or until they're over. Like those are the two indicators. But like, I really like involving my audience and I really like telling them about the good stuff and the bad stuff. And I think it's really funny to catch people off guard and also everybody's on the toilet when they're on Instagram. I don't care who you are. You have looked at Instagram while you're taking a poo. So don't play that game with me, girl.
Yeah, bam. You've been served. You've been served.
Yeah, you've been served.
And AG East Los Perros says, "You've inspired me to open my own gym." Hashtag Matt Bullies. Right on. And we'll follow. So that's it. I followed you. You guys should too. Again, thank you so much for joining us here at According to Woods. And my goodness, thank you guys for watching us here. And if you haven't, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, yeah, thanks, guys. That's been awesome. Really love talking with you.
Absolutely. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead and subscribe to the According to Woods podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Because I'd be glad you did. And Beans, you're subscribed, right?
Yeah, I'm going to subscribe right now.
See? So be like Beans and subscribe. But don't take my word for it. Don't take Beans' word for it. Just ours, right? Here's Pro Wrestler Zeta Zhang.
Hey, this is Zeta Zhang. Make sure you subscribe to